Jinho Park stared out the transport window at the massive warship waiting in orbit. The vessel looked like a floating city made of silver and dark metal, with weapons bristling from every surface. He had seen coalition ships before, but never one preparing for battle. This was the Harmony's Edge, flagship of the combined fleet, and somehow he was supposed to board it and watch a war happen. The diplomatic pouch in his lap felt heavier than it should. Inside were his orders, written in the formal language that Earth's Foreign Service loved so much. The message was simple enough, though. Observe, record, do not interfere. Jinho had been doing this job for 8 years now. He had watched trade negotiations, territorial disputes, and cultural exchanges. He had never watched people die. First time on a warship? The pilot, a Centaurian with blue skin and too many fingers, glanced back at him. First time, Jinho admitted. He tried to keep his voice steady. Diplomats were supposed to be calm, unshakable. That was what the training manual said, anyway. Don't worry. You'll be safe enough. They always keep the observers away from the fighting. The pilot laughed, though it didn't sound particularly comforting. Probably won't even see much. Just a lot of lights and noise. The transport docked with a metallic clang that echoed through the small cabin. Jinho gathered his things and stepped into the airlock. The air smelled different on the warship, metallic and sharp, like ozone after a thunderstorm. The corridors were wider than he expected, built to accommodate the dozens of species that made up the coalition forces. A group of Thalian soldiers passed him, their scaled skin gleaming under the harsh lights. They didn't look at him. A human officer waited at the end of the corridor. She was young, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and military short black hair. Her uniform was crisp, covered in patches and insignias Jinho didn't recognize. Observer Park? She didn't wait for his answer. I'm Sub-Commander Hayeri Nam. I'll be your liaison during the engagement. Follow me. Jinho hurried to keep up as she strode through the ship. Hayeri moved like someone who had spent years in space, her steps quick and confident, even in the artificial gravity. I'm supposed to brief you on protocols, Hayeri said without slowing down. But honestly, it's simple. Stay in your assigned area. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first. And for the love of everything, don't try to give suggestions. The commanders don't like observers who think they're tacticians. I understand, Jinho said. I'm just here to document. Good. Hayeri stopped at a door marked with symbols in 6 different languages. This is your observation deck. It's not much, but you'll have a clear view of the battle space. Recording equipment is already set up. Food dispensers are in the corner. Bathroom is through that door. Questions? Jinho looked past her into the small room. It was barely larger than his apartment back on Earth. One wall was entirely transparent, showing the vast darkness of space and the distant stars. A simple chair sat in front of the window. No computers, no tactical displays, just glass and emptiness. No tactical information? He asked. You're an observer, not a commander. You watch. That's it. Hayeri's expression softened slightly. Look, I know this seems pointless, but the Coalition Charter requires neutral observers for major engagements. Someone has to witness what happens here and report it truthfully. That's you. She left before Jinho could respond. The door slid shut with a soft hiss, and suddenly he was alone. He sat in the chair and looked out at space. Somewhere out there, the enemy was coming. The Vikrin Dominion, they were called. In 3 months, they had conquered 12 star systems. Their fleets were larger, their weapons more powerful, their tactics ruthless. The Coalition was losing badly, and Earth had sent Jinho Park, a mid-level diplomat who specialized in trade agreements, to watch it happen. Hours passed slowly. Jinho tried to read through the briefing materials on his datapad, but his eyes kept drifting to the window. More ships were arriving, taking up positions in a formation he couldn't understand. Each vessel was different, reflecting the species that built it. Some were sleek and organic-looking, others were angular and mechanical. He counted 37 ships before he lost track. The door chimed. Hyeri entered carrying 2 cups of something that steamed. "Coffee," she said, handing him one. "Real coffee, not the synthetic stuff. Figured you might need it." "Thank you." Jinho took the cup gratefully. The warmth felt good in his hands. Hyeri stood beside him, looking out at the fleet. "You ever wonder why they picked you for this?" "Every hour since I got the assignment," Jinho admitted. "I'm not senior enough for something this important. I'm not military. I don't know anything about naval combat. Maybe that's why." Hyeri sipped her coffee. "You won't have preconceptions. You'll just see what happens and write it down. Sometimes that's more valuable than expertise." "Do you think we can win?" Jinho asked. Hyeri was quiet for a long moment. "The Vecran have better ships, better weapons, and 3 times our numbers. They've beaten every fleet we've sent against them." She paused. "But Commander Rivek is good. Maybe the best we have. If anyone can find a way, it's him." "You don't sound convinced." "I'm a realist." Hyeri finished her coffee and set the cup down. "The Vecran have a simple strategy. They hit hard, fast, and overwhelming. Most species surrender before the real fighting even starts. That's how they've conquered so quickly. Fear is their best weapon, and the Coalition won't surrender. We can't. If we lose here, they'll have a clear path to 15 more systems, including 3 human colonies." Hyeri headed for the door. "Get some rest. The Vecran fleet should arrive in about 6 hours. After that, things are going to get very loud and very scary." After she left, Jinho sat alone with his thoughts. He activated the recording equipment and began his first log entry, speaking quietly to the camera. "Observer log, Jinho Park, Earth Foreign Service. I am aboard the Coalition flagship Harmony's Edge at the Helion Gateway. The fleet is assembled and waiting. In 6 hours, we will engage the Vecran Dominion in what may be the most important battle of this war." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know what I'm supposed to see here. I don't know what difference my observations will make. But I will do my duty. I will watch, and I will remember." He ended the recording and turned back to the window. The stars looked very cold and very far away. The alarm woke Jinho from a restless sleep. Red lights pulsed through the observation deck as a mechanical voice announced something in 6 different languages. By the time it reached Korean, Jinho was already on his feet. "Enemy fleet detected. All personnel to battle stations." This is not a drill. He pressed his face close to the window. At first, he saw nothing but the familiar stars and the Coalition fleet holding position. Then space itself seemed to tear open. Purple light spilled from a massive rift, and ships began pouring through. Not dozens. Hundreds dot the Vecran fleet emerged like a swarm of insects, black against the purple glow. Their ships were different from the Coalition vessels, all sharp angles and aggressive designs. They spread out in perfect formation, surrounding the Coalition forces in a wide sphere. Jinho's hands trembled as he activated the recording equipment. "The Vecran fleet has arrived," he said, keeping his voice as steady as possible. "Initial count suggests at least 300 vessels, possibly more. They are attempting an encirclement maneuver." Through the window, he watched the Coalition fleet begin to move. The ships that had seemed so powerful before now looked small and fragile. The Harmony's Edge turned ponderously, its massive engines glowing blue. Other vessels followed, but there was no coordination. Each species' ships moved in their own patterns, responding to their own commanders. The first shots came suddenly. Beams of red light crossed the darkness, striking coalition shields in flashes of white and gold. The battle had begun. Jinho had expected noise, explosions, the sounds of war. But in the vacuum of space, everything happened in eerie silence. He could only see the lights, the energy weapons cutting through space, the shields flickering and failing. A smaller coalition ship took a direct hit. Its shields collapsed, and secondary explosions loomed across its hull. It began to drift, lifeless. The door chimed. Hyeri entered, her face grim. "You should move away from the window," she said. "If a weapon breaches our shields, I need to see." Jinho interrupted. "That's why I'm here." "Fine, but strap into the chair. If we take a hit, the artificial gravity might fluctuate." Jinho did as she suggested, securing the safety harness across his chest. "What's happening? Why aren't we fighting in formation?" Hyeri stood beside him, watching the battle unfold. "We are. Sort of. The problem is that the Coalition has 17 different species, and each one has its own way of fighting. The Thalians prefer close-range plasma weapons. The Centaurians use long-range missiles. The Drell favor hit-and-run tactics. Commander Ravik is trying to coordinate them all, but it's like conducting an orchestra where everyone's playing a different song." Another explosion lit up the space. This time it was a Vikron ship, torn apart by concentrated fire from 3 Coalition vessels. But for every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more moved in to take its place. "We're losing," Jinho said quietly. "We're not losing yet," Hyeri corrected. "But we're not winning either." Hours passed. Jinho remained strapped in the chair, his eyes burning from staring at the bright flashes of weapons fire. He recorded everything he saw, speaking into the camera in a low voice, describing the battle like a sports commentator, describing a game. Except this game was killing thousands of people. The Coalition fleet was being pushed back, compressed into a tighter and tighter formation. 3 more ships had been destroyed, their debris floating among the wreckage of earlier battles. The Vecron seemed endless, their ships rotating out damaged vessels and bringing in fresh ones. They were treating this like a routine operation. Nothing urgent, nothing desperate. Then something changed. Jinho noticed it first in the Vecron's attack patterns. They were avoiding certain angles, refusing to close in on the Coalition's port side, even though the defenses there were weakest. He leaned forward, studying the enemy movements. "Are you seeing this?" he asked Hyeri. "Seeing what?" "The Vecron ships. They're not pressing their advantage on the left flank. Look, there's a gap in our formation right there, but they're not moving in." Hyeri squinted at the battle. "Maybe they're preparing for something bigger. A coordinated strike. No." Jinho shook his head. "They've had a dozen opportunities for coordinated strikes. They're not taking them. It's like they're holding back. Why would they hold back when they're winning?" "I don't know." Jinho unstrapped himself and moved closer to the window. "But they're doing it. Every 30 or 40 minutes, they shift their formation. They're not just attacking. They're testing. Testing what? How we respond. How we fight. They're gathering data." Hyeri pulled out her communicator. "I need to report this to Commander Rivik. Will he listen?" "Probably not. But I have to try." She keyed in a code and spoke rapidly in Thalian, the language most Coalition commanders used. Jinho heard his name mentioned, then a long pause. Hyeri's expression darkened. She ended the call. "He says thanks for the observation, but to leave the tactical analysis to trained officers." "But I know." Hyeri looked frustrated. "He's under enormous pressure. Half the Coalition Council is demanding he pull back. The other half is demanding a full assault. He doesn't have time for theories from a civilian observer. A new alarm sounded. This one was different, more urgent. Through the window, Jinho saw something that made his blood run cold. A Vecron weapon, larger than anything they'd used before, fired a purple beam that didn't just hit its target. The beam spread, jumping from one coalition ship to another like lightning, disabling shields and systems. The main command vessel went dark, its lights flickering out. Cascade weapon, Hyeri breathed. They've been saving it. Without the command ship coordinating efforts, the coalition fleet began to scatter. Ships moved in random directions, some trying to retreat, others pushing forward, all coordination lost. The Vecron pressed their advantage, their formations tightening like a noose. The Harmony's edge shuddered. Jinho grabbed the chair to steady himself as the artificial gravity wavered. Emergency lights activated, bathing everything in red. We just became the flagship, Hyeri said. Commander Ravik is in charge of the entire fleet now. Is he ready? He has to be. But through the window, Jinho could see the battle turning into a massacre. Coalition ships were being picked off one by one. The Vecron had stopped testing and started finishing. They moved with precision, their black ships darting through space like predators circling wounded prey. Jinho felt helpless. He was supposed to observe, to record, to document. But what good was documentation if everyone died? He turned to Hyeri. I need to speak with Ryvek. That's not going to happen. Please. I've noticed something. Something important. Hyeri studied his face for a long moment. What did you notice? The Vecron are afraid of something, Jinho said. They're winning, but they're still being careful. They're still avoiding certain engagement patterns. They're not committing their full force. I've studied negotiations for years. I know what caution looks like, even in war. What would they be afraid of? They have us outnumbered 3-1. I don't know yet. Jinho looked back at the battle. But if I'm right, maybe we can use it. Another explosion lit up the darkness. Another coalition ship gone. Time was running out, and Jinho was stuck in a small room, watching people die. Unable to do anything about it, Hyeri made a decision. I'll get you 5 minutes with Ryvik, but if he orders you removed, that's it. Understood? Understood. She left the observation deck at a run. Jinho turned back to the window, his mind racing. The Vecron were afraid. But of what? What could make a conquering empire afraid? 18 hours into the battle, Jinho's eyes felt like sandpaper. The coalition fleet had been reduced to half its original size. Wreckage floated everywhere, glinting in the light of distant stars. The Vecron continued their methodical assault, showing no signs of fatigue or hesitation. Hyeri hadn't returned. Jinho assumed Commander Ryvik had refused his request to speak, or perhaps the commander was too busy trying to keep everyone alive. Either way, Jinho remained in his observation deck, watching the slow destruction of the fleet. He had filled 3 data cards with recordings. Every movement, every attack pattern, every decision made by both sides. The recordings would be valuable to historians, he supposed, if anyone survived to watch them. The observation deck shuddered. Warning lights flashed. Something had hit the Harmony's edge, something powerful enough to penetrate the outer shields. Jinho gripped his chair as the ship listed to one side. Through the window, he could see a section of the hull venting atmosphere, tiny crystals of frozen air, sparkling as they dispersed into space. The door burst open. But it wasn't Hyeri. A Vecron warrior stood in the doorway. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, with dark armor covering its body. Its face was exposed, showing features that were almost reptilian, with scales and sharp angles. In its hands was a weapon that glowed with purple energy. Jinho's training said to remain calm, to show no fear. His body disagreed. His heart hammered against his ribs. He stood slowly, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. The Vecron warrior moved into the room, its weapon pointed at Jinho's chest. It studied him with eyes that were too large and entirely black. Its breathing came in sharp hisses. "You," the warrior said in broken galactic standard. The voice was harsh, mechanical. "You are human, yes? From Death World, Terra?" Jinho blinked in surprise. "Yes, I'm human. From Earth." The warrior's weapon lowered slightly. Its expression changed, the scales around its eyes tightening. If Jinho didn't know better, he would say the creature looked afraid. "You are diplomat?" The warrior asked. "Observer. I'm just here to watch. I'm not military. Just watch." The warrior made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. Humans never just watch. Humans wait. Humans study. Then humans destroy. Before Junho could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. The warrior's head snapped around. It looked at Jinho one more time, then turned and ran from the room, its heavy footsteps echoing down the corridor. Jinho stood frozen for several seconds. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking. The warrior had been terrified, not of Jinho specifically, but of what he represented. It had called Earth a death world. It had spoken about humans like they were something to fear. The door opened again. This time it was Hyeri, with 2 security officers behind her. Their weapons were drawn. "Are you hurt?" Hyeri demanded. "No, it didn't attack me." Jinho sat down heavily. It was afraid. It asked if I was human, and then it ran. Vecron don't run. They're the most aggressive species in the sector. This one did. Jinho looked up at her. It called Earth a death world. What does that mean? Hyeri exchanged glances with the security officers. "I need you to come with me, now." They moved through the corridors of the damaged ship. Emergency crews ran past, carrying equipment and wounded. The walls showed scorch marks from weapons fire. Jinho realized just how close he had come to dying. Hyeri led him to a secure room deep in the ship's interior. Inside was a single terminal and a chair. She locked the door behind them. "I need to show you something," she said, activating the terminal. But officially, this conversation never happened. "Understood? What's going on?" 50 years ago, a Vecran scout probe entered the solar system. It spent 6 months orbiting Earth, scanning everything. Our satellites detected it, but it left before we could investigate. Hyeri pulled up files on the screen. We didn't think much of it at the time. First contact protocols were different back then. We assumed they were just curious. And the probe transmitted data back to Vecron space. Massive amounts of data. Everything it learned about Earth, about humans, about our history. She brought up a document, pages and pages of Vecron text. We only recovered this 5 years ago from a captured Vecron database. It's their analysis of humanity. Jinho leaned forward, reading the translated sections. His blood ran cold. The report detailed Earth's history with clinical precision. Every war, every weapon, every conflict from ancient times to the modern era. The Bronze Age invasions, the Roman conquests, the Mongol hordes, the world wars, the nuclear weapons, the resource wars that killed billions, the unification wars that nearly destroyed the planet. But it wasn't just a history. It was an analysis. The Vecron had tried to understand why humans fought so much. Their conclusion was terrifying in its simplicity. Humans were the most persistently violent species they had ever studied. Not the strongest, not the most advanced, but the most relentless, the most adaptable, the most willing to sacrifice everything rather than surrender. They think we're monsters, Gino whispered. They think you're something worse than monsters, Hyeri corrected. Monsters can be killed. According to this report, humans can't be defeated, only delayed. The Vikron concluded that any war with humanity would last generations and cost more than any victory would be worth. But we've never fought the Vekron. We've been at peace for a century. That doesn't matter to them. They've seen what we did to each other. They've studied our tactics, our weapons, our refusal to quit even when losing. Hyeri pulled up another document. This is their risk assessment for engaging human military forces. It's classified at the highest level. Only their supreme commanders have access to it. Jinho read the summary. It recommended avoiding direct conflict with human forces at all costs. If engagement was unavoidable, the report suggested overwhelming force with the goal of immediate surrender. Under no circumstances should a prolonged conflict be allowed to develop, as human forces would adapt and find ways to strike back even from positions of total defeat. The Coalition knows about this? Jinho asked. Earth's government knows. The Coalition leadership knows. But it's classified. The other species didn't want to know that humans were considered the scary ones. Hyeri smiled without humor. We're part of the Coalition, but we're also the species everyone's secretly afraid of. They needed our technology and our industrial capacity, but they never wanted to see us as warriors. Why are you telling me this? Because that Vikran warrior recognized you. Not your face. Your species. And it ran. Hyeri leaned back against the wall. The Vekran have conquered 12 systems in 3 months. They've beaten every species they've encountered. But they've avoided every human colony, every human trade route, every human installation. They're terrified of starting a war with us. Jinho's mind raced. That's why they're being careful. They think Earth might intervene. Exactly. And now you're here. A human on the Coalition flagship, watching them fight. Hyeri's eyes were intense. They don't know you're just an observer. They might think you're military intelligence. They might think you're here to assess their capabilities before Earth declares war. But that's not true. Does it matter? Their fear is real, whether the threat is real or not. Jinho stood and paced the small room. An idea was forming, terrible and desperate. What if we use that fear? What do you mean? I'm supposed to be an observer, neutral, non-threatening. Jinho turned to face her. But what if I stop being neutral? What if I make them believe that Earth is watching, that Earth is evaluating, that Earth is getting ready to act? That would be a violation of your orders. You're supposed to observe, not participate. My orders assumed I'd be watching a normal battle. This isn't normal anymore. Jinho met her eyes. How many people have died in the last 18 hours? At least 15,000. And how many more will die if this continues? Hyeri was quiet for a moment. What do you need? Jinho sat in front of a communications terminal, his hands hovering over the controls. Behind him, Hyeri stood with her arms crossed. Commander Ravik's face filled the screen, his scaled features showing exhaustion and frustration. Explain to me again why I should allow a civilian observer to broadcast on open channels during a battle. Rivik said. Because we're losing, Jinho replied simply. In another 6 hours, this fleet will be destroyed. You know it. I know it. The Vekron know it. But there's something they don't know. And what is that? They don't know why I'm really here. Jinho leaned forward. Commander, the Vikron have been studying humanity for 50 years. They're afraid of us. Not because we're stronger, but because our history shows we never stop fighting. That warrior who breached the ship ran when he realized I was human. He didn't run from me. He ran from what I represent. Ryvek's eyes narrowed. You want to bluff. I want to remind them what they're afraid of. I want to make them question whether this battle is worth the risk of provoking Earth. And if they call your bluff, if they realize Earth has no intention of intervening, then we're no worse off than we are now. But if it works, even for a few hours, it might give us an advantage. Jinho pulled up the historical data Hyeri had shown him. Let me show them what they're really afraid of. Ryvek was silent for a long moment. If you do this, you're violating the Observer Protocol. Earth's government will not be pleased. I'll take responsibility. Put it in your report that I acted without authorization. That will protect you from the consequences. I know. Jinho's voice was steady. But I'd rather face consequences than watch 15,000 more people die when I could have done something. Ryvek studied him through the screen. Finally, he nodded. You have authorization for one broadcast. Make it count. The screen went dark. Jinho's hands were shaking again, but this time from determination rather than fear. He began typing, pulling up files from Earth's historical archives. The casualties. The weapons. The sieges. All of it? Are you sure about this? Hyeri asked quietly. No. Jinho didn't look away from the screen. But I'm sure about doing nothing even less. He selected the open channel frequency, the one used for battlefield communications. Every ship in the area, both Coalition and Vikron, would receive his transmission. He activated the recording system and took a deep breath. This message is for the Vecron fleet. Jinho spoke in English first, then switched to Korean, then Mandarin. He wanted them to hear human languages, to be reminded exactly who was speaking. I am Observer Jinho Park, representing Earth and humanity in this engagement. For 18 hours, I have watched your fleet attack the Coalition forces. I have recorded your tactics, your weapons, your strategies. All of this data will be transmitted to Earth's military command. He paused, letting that sink in. Then he continued, his voice cold and factual. You have studied our history. You know what humans are capable of. Let me remind you of some specific details. In the year 1939 by Earth's calendar, humans began a war that killed between 70 and 85 million people. We used chemical weapons, firebombs, atomic weapons. We fought in deserts, in jungles, in frozen tundra, in cities reduced to rubble. The war ended only when 2 cities were completely destroyed by nuclear fire. Jinho pulled up casualty figures and read them like a grocery list. In the resource wars of 2087, human casualties exceeded 2 billion. We fought over water, over food, over land. We used biological weapons that made entire regions uninhabitable. We deployed autonomous war machines that continued fighting for years after their creators were dead. We poisoned our own planet rather than surrender it to our enemies. He switched to the siege of Bizen, pulling up images from the archives. In 2156, human defenders held the city of Bizen for 18 months against overwhelming force. They ate recycled protein and algae paste. They fought with improvised weapons made from scrap metal. When they ran out of ammunition, they used rocks and broken glass. The siege ended only when there was literally nothing left to fight over. The defenders never surrendered. Jinho leaned back, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You believe you are a warrior species because you have conquered 12 systems. Humanity has been at war with itself for 10,000 years. Every generation, we find new ways to kill each other. Every century, we develop weapons more terrible than the last. And we have never, in all of our bloody history, had a war where one side completely surrendered without fighting to the last possible moment. He paused again, then delivered the final message. I am only an observer. I am not a soldier. I am not a general. I am a diplomat whose job is to watch and record. This is the person Earth sent to observe your fleet. Think carefully about what kind of people Earth would send if we decided to do more than observe. Jinho ended the transmission and sat back, his heart pounding. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. "Well," Hayeri said, "if nothing else, you definitely got their attention. Now we wait." Jinho closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted. "And we hope they're as afraid as we think they are." Hours passed. The battle had paused. Not stopped, but paused. The Vacron fleet held position, their ships forming a defensive sphere. They weren't attacking, but they weren't retreating either. The coalition forces regrouped, using the unexpected breathing room to tend to damaged ships and wounded crew. "Commander," Ryvik called Jinho back to the communications room. "Their formation has changed. They're consolidating, pulling their forces together. Is that good or bad? I don't know. It could mean they're preparing for a final assault. Or it could mean they're reassessing." Ryvik's expression was unreadable. "Your broadcast reached every ship in the sector. Our communications team has been monitoring Vecron channels. They're talking about you. What are they saying? We can't translate most of it, but we caught a few phrases. Deathworld representative. Historical threat assessment. Terra intervention risk." Ryvik leaned forward. "You scared them. Whether that's enough remains to be seen." Jinho returned to his observation deck. Through the window, the battle space looked frozen, like someone had pressed pause on a video. Coalition ships floated in defensive formations. Vecron vessels held their positions. And in the space between them, debris from destroyed ships drifted slowly, a reminder of what had already been lost. He began recording again. "This is Observer Jinho Park. 22 hours into the engagement, the battle has reached an unexpected pause. The Vecron fleet is holding position. Coalition forces are using this time to regroup. I have violated my orders as an observer. I have chosen to participate rather than simply watch. History will judge whether this decision was correct." He stopped recording and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, across all that empty space, was Earth, his home. A planet that had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times before finally learning to work together. A planet whose history was written in blood and fire, and now that history might save thousands of lives. Or it might mean nothing. All Jinho could do was wait and see. The communicator chimed. It was Hayeri. "You need to see this," she said. "The Vecron flagship is broadcasting. They want to talk." The command center of the Harmony's Edge was crowded with officers from a dozen different species. Jinho stood at the back, trying to make himself small. He shouldn't be here at all, but Commander Ryvik had insisted. If the Vecron wanted to talk, they might want to talk to the human who had broadcast that message. The main view screen flickered to life. The image quality was perfect, showing the bridge of the Vecron flagship in sharp detail. At the center stood a being that could only be supreme, Commander Thrall. It was taller than the warrior who had entered Jinho's observation deck, with more elaborate armor and scars that marked its face and arms. Its black eyes swept across the coalition officers, then stopped on Jinho. "I will speak with the human observer," Thrall said in perfect galactic standard. Its voice was deep and controlled. Commander Ryvik stepped forward. "I am the commander of this fleet. You will address me. I will address the one who speaks for Earth. All others are irrelevant to this discussion." Thrall's eyes never left Jinho. "Come forward, observer. Let me see the representative of the Death World." Jinho felt every eye in the room turn to him. Slowly, he moved through the crowd of officers until he stood in front of the view screen. He forced himself to meet Thrall's gaze. "I'm here," Jinho said. "Your transmission was received and analyzed. You spoke of Earth's wars, of your species' capacity for violence, of the siege where humans ate paste and fought with broken glass. Thrall tilted its head slightly. We have known these facts for 50 years. We have studied your history extensively. This is not new information. And why did you stop attacking? Because for 50 years, the information was theoretical, historical data from a distant world. But now you are here, in person, watching us, recording us, evaluating us. Thrall moved closer to its own view screen. Tell me, observer, why did Earth send you? I told you. I'm here to document the battle. You are here alone. No military escort. No warships. No threat of force. Just one diplomat with a recording device. Thrall's expression was difficult to read, but something in its voice suggested confusion. This makes no strategic sense. Unless Earth believes one observer is all that is needed. Jinho realized what Thrall was really asking. You think I'm here as a threat. Are you not? A representative from the most persistently violent species in known space, watching a battle between the Coalition and the Vikron Dominion. A species that has avoided direct conflict with humanity for 5 decades. And now you are here, broadcasting reminders of human brutality. Thrall paused. What other purpose could you have? I was sent to observe. Nothing more. I do not believe you. Thrall turned away from the screen, speaking to someone off camera. Then it looked back at Jinho. Let me explain something about Vecron military doctrine. We conquer through overwhelming force. We defeat enemies quickly and decisively. This strategy has worked for 300 years across 30 systems. I know. I've read the reports. But it does not work against humans. We have run thousands of simulations. Every scenario ends the same way. Even if we achieve total victory, even if we destroy every human warship and occupy every human world, you will continue fighting. You will use guerrilla tactics. You will sabotage our supply lines. You will fight for generations if necessary. Thrall's voice carried a note that might have been respect or might have been fear. You reached space not through cooperation, but through competition. You developed atomic weapons before you cured your diseases. You created artificial intelligence to optimize warfare before using it for medicine. Every advancement in your civilization came from military necessity. Jinho had never thought of human history that way, but he couldn't deny the truth of it. We've changed. We've been at peace for a century. Have you? Or have you simply redirected that aggressive energy? Your industrial output exceeds that of any 3 coalition species combined. Your exploration fleets push into dangerous space that others avoid. Your scientists work on projects that terrify other species. Thrall leaned forward. You have not changed. You have simply chosen not to fight. Yet, what do you want from me? I want to understand. Your species achieved everything through violence, and now you hide behind diplomats and observers. You have the capacity to wage war on a scale that would make the Coalition's efforts look insignificant, and yet you send one unarmed man to watch battles from a safe distance. Thrall's eyes were intense. Are you truly just an observer? Or are you the warning? The final chance to stop before humanity decides to act? Jinho felt the weight of the question. He could lie, could pretend to be more than he was, could maintain the bluff and hope it worked. But he had spent his career pursuing truth and honest negotiation. He couldn't abandon that now, even if lives depended on it. I'm truly just an observer, he said quietly. I have no authority to speak for Earth's military. I'm not a soldier or a spy. I'm a mid-level diplomat who happened to be in this sector when the Coalition needed someone to document the battle. Everything I told you about human history is true, but I have no power to threaten you. I can only watch and record. The command center was silent. Commander Ryvek looked like he wanted to interrupt, to keep the bluff alive, but he remained quiet. Thrall stared at Jinho for a long moment. Then it made a sound that might have been laughter. That is precisely why I believe you now. A warrior would threaten. A politician would negotiate. But you simply told the truth, despite knowing it might cost you any advantage. It turned to address its own crew. There is an ancient Vecron saying, the most dangerous enemy is the one who has nothing to prove. I don't understand, Jinho said. Humanity does not need to prove its strength. Your history proves it for you. You do not need to threaten because your past speaks loud enough. And you do not need to send armies because sending one honest diplomat is more terrifying than sending a fleet. Thrall's expression became formal, ceremonial. I am authorized by the Vecron High Command to offer a conditional ceasefire. We will withdraw from Coalition space. In exchange, Earth agrees to remain neutral in future conflicts between the Vecron Dominion and Coalition forces. The command center erupted in shocked voices. Officers from every species shouted questions, demands, confusion. Commander Ryvek raised his hands for silence. You're surrendering? Ryvek asked. We are withdrawing. There is a difference. Thrall's eyes moved back to Jinho. We have achieved our military objectives in other sectors. This particular battle has become too costly to continue, especially with human observation now involved. If Earth chooses to intervene on behalf of the Coalition, the calculus of this entire war changes. We would rather withdraw now than risk that possibility. Jinho felt dizzy. They weren't surrendering to the Coalition forces. They were surrendering to the possibility of fighting humans, to the ghost of 10,000 years of warfare, to history itself. I have no authority to agree to anything on Earth's behalf, Jinho said. I know, but you will return to Earth and report what happened here. You will tell them that the Vecron Dominion chose to avoid conflict with humanity. That will have to be enough. Thrall stepped back from the screen. We will begin our withdrawal in 1 hour. I suggest you use that time wisely, observer. You have changed the course of this war by simply existing. Consider what that means for the future. The screen went dark. The command center remained silent for several seconds. Then everyone began talking at once. Jinho couldn't process any of it. He turned and walked out, needing air, needing space, needing to think. Hayeri found him in the observation deck an hour later. Through the window, the Vecron fleet was moving, ships breaking formation, and heading back toward the quantum fold point they had emerged from. Slowly, methodically, they were leaving. The Council is demanding answers, Hayeri said. They want to know if Earth authorized your actions. They want to know if this was planned. They want to know if humans have been manipulating Coalition security policy for years. What did you tell them? The truth. That you're a mid-level diplomat who got scared and decided to try something desperate. Some of them believe me. Some don't. She sat down beside him. You know this is going to follow you for the rest of your career. I know. You might be reassigned, demoted, maybe even discharged from the Foreign Service. I know. Was it worth it? Jinho thought about that. Through the window, he could see Coalition ships regrouping, damaged but intact. Thousands of lives that would have been lost were now saved. Not because of any brilliant strategy or powerful weapon, but because of fear. Because of history. Because humanity's past was so terrible that even explaining it was enough to stop a war. Yes, he said finally. It was worth it. 72 hours later, the last Vecron ship vanished into the quantum fold. The battle was over. The Coalition had won, though no one could quite explain how. Reports would be written, analyzed, debated. Politicians would argue about what it meant. Military strategists would study the battle for years to come. But Jinho knew the truth. The enemy hadn't surrendered to superior force or brilliant tactics. They had surrendered to the possibility of fighting humans, to the fear of what might happen if Earth decided to stop observing and start participating. He stood alone in the observation deck, recording his final log entry. This is Observer Jinho Park. The battle at Helion Gateway has concluded. The Vikran Dominion has withdrawn. Coalition casualties were heavy, but lower than projected. I have completed my mission to observe and document, though I violated protocols in the process. My recommendation is that Earth carefully considers its reputation in the galaxy. We have become something we never intended to be. We are not the strongest species. We are not the most advanced. But we may be the most feared. And that fear comes not from what we might do, but from what we have already done. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps it has to be. He ended the recording and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, across all that darkness, was home. A world with a terrible history and an uncertain future. A world that had just won a war without firing a single shot. Jinho closed his eyes and hoped humanity would use this power wisely. Because if fear was their greatest weapon, then trust would be even harder to build. And in the end, that might matter more than any battle.